It is Scagz here, and you are listening to the Two Doom Men podcast. No captain today. I am joined instead by not the king of the Southlands, but the king of the trash realm, Jimbo the Kid, and also Big Mark. It is well after dark, and we are in the park. The Fellowship of Doom, I'm going to call the three of us. And,
I like it.
We are here to doomed review the Rings of Power Season 1 in its entirety. So what's going on, boys? Thank you for helping me out with this one. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Couldn't pass it up. Got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. The three of us are like super huge Lord of the Rings nerds. Mark, especially me and you. Jimbo, you too.
Yep.
We did review episode 3, and we did a little talking about it ahead of time. So I'm really more so interested because I think everybody probably knows I didn't like it. So I'm really more so interested to get your guys' opinion of the season in general. Jimbo, I kind of got yours a little bit. So, but Mark, I'm interested. We haven't talked about this at all. What did you think?
I'm surprised you didn't like it. I guess I'm giving it a little leeway because they have a limited source material to work with. And I just like being back in this world again. I think they're doing a good job, like definitely scenery wise. It's gorgeous. I like the story. You know, there's definitely parts it's not the greatest. It's not absolutely perfect, but I just like being in this world again. And I think it's for what they have to work with and for the time that we're in. I think it's pretty good. I do have my complaints as well, though.
Yeah, I do like like they spent, I think, like $1 billion on the show in general.
Yeah.
So like the scenery of like Eregion and Numenor, like the cities and whatnot, is like pretty dope. Like that does look really good when they give you pretty decent shots of it. I thought like Moria too looked pretty good, like the Dwarven Kingdom and whatnot.
Right.
The Balrog looked pretty dope too. He looked pretty accurate.
Yeah, big time.
One of my criticisms of it is going to be that they teased that and they kind of just like left that out at the end, like for the next season, I guess. One of my main criticisms, I'll leave aside most of the woke stuff, which I'm going to try and do in most of these reviews because there's a lot of woke shit in all these shows. But one of my main criticisms is like there's no sense of time in the show. Like it's hard to tell like when something is happening and how long it's been since the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how there's a couple of different areas where people are at. It's hard to tell like when they are, where they are. I guess kind of like the only way we kind of knew that what the Harfoots and Gandalf were doing was at the same time as Mordor is because like debris from Mordor landed where they were at, which is just, I don't know, just crazy, right? I looked it up. The Shire is like 1,700 miles away from Mordor, so I don't understand how they pulled that one off. I don't know.
What do we know that's the Shire?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, looking back to the finale here, I think they tried to make it that tree that like the Gandalf brought back to life is like the tree at Bag End at like the top of the hill there.
At Bilbo's party, yeah.
And
Okay. I didn't
like
make
if you
that
look
connection.
at it, there was like a shot when they were like leaving or walking away, like it looked like the beginning of like the steps going up to Bag End, kind of. So that's like supposed to be the Shire where like the Harfoots are settling down now.
So what you said about the debris not being able to reach there, I don't know if maybe that's not the Shire.
I mean, maybe not, but
you said, it's hard to determine because time isn't really handled well, and even location isn't really handled well. That is true. So you really can't tell. They're pretty nomadic. It seems like the Harfoots.
Yeah.
So they go on the same trek to go seasonally where it's better here, the food's better here this time of the year, we got to trek here. So maybe the other end of their journey is the Shire.
Yeah, I think too, like their carts getting burned signified like the end of them being nomadic, and now they have to like settle down in this area, which they I guess then turned into the hobbits later on. So that's at least how I understood it, that was the Shire. That was them like finding the Shire and establishing it. But again, I didn't think it made much sense that if that is in fact the Shire, somehow, like rocks from Mount Doom flew 2,000 miles in the air to the Shire and landed there. So
Right.
I don't know. It's just a bit
No,
weird.
that it's a big inconsistency for
Yeah, and
sure.
there's a lot of little inconsistencies like that throughout the entire season. Jimbo, what do you think over there?
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Good.
I feel
I'm
so
good.
professional. This is amazing. Yeah, so I have a couple questions for you guys. So you're saying Gandalf, correct? The
Yeah, he's
mystery man, is that Gandalf?
yeah. So they did call him the Istari, right? Which is like
Right.
a name of Gandalf's order, I guess you could say, like the
Okay.
wizardry order.
All
So
right.
it's
Because
Gandalf
at first she
for the most
said
part.
it's him thinking that it was Sauron
Right.
at first, because he had so much power and they were like, oh, he's good, right? Also too, at the end, we know who Sauron really is when he's on the ship with Galadriel, which is a great scene, by
Which
the
I
way.
was right, by the way. You
Um,
remember I told you after our
yes, you
review?
were. Yes, you were.
Yes.
Yes, you were. 100%. I mean, you nailed it. So now I have a question for both of you. I don't know if you're gonna know, but so I was trying to read up on it because I was just confused as hell as the mystery man being Gandalf. Now, is it possible that Sauron can be two personalities?
Yeah, like from
Like a good and evil, but then the evil overcomes. Because I was confused with that whole part because they don't tell you it's Gandalf. You know what I mean? So
so
I don't know if
well,
it's
Sauron can like I guess take different forms and shapes and
yeah,
stuff like that. I do think that that's not Sauron, though. I think that was like bad writing by the directors, where they were like, "We have to throw everybody off, so we're going to say that this was Sauron at the beginning of the episode." Because if you somehow
yeah,
haven't found out, you figured out yet that Halbrand is Sauron, we want to throw you off right before the end, like before we throw you a curve at the end.
yeah.
There's
Because
a lot of like
I
little
when I
weird things
look
like that I didn't like about the show. Like
yeah,
that,
because when I read up on it, it stated that he can shapeshift, he
yes,
can be all different type of beings, like we saw in the regular saga, the trilogy, Lord of the Rings, that he's an eye. So he takes many positions. And my thing was I thought that it was he has a two split personality where there is a good Sauron and then a bad Sauron, that but the bad Sauron overtakes the good in a sense. That's what the way I got it from that scene. I don't know, but
from which scene? From the scene with Gandalf or
in
the
the
scene
beginning with the chicks,
with the
the one who looked like Justin Bieber.
yeah, Feminem, as
I had to
people
throw
are
that in. I'm
calling her.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Very true.
Yeah. But yeah, that they thought that he was Sauron, and why would you go to him then? What was attracting you? His power, or
I guess
That's
so.
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was the fact that they just realized that somebody of immense power came to Middle Earth and they were like, oh shit, this must be who we've been waiting for. It's got to be Sauron. And then at the very end, when he basically is about to disintegrate them, the girl goes, oh, wait, no, this is the other. And then they say Istari. So they
Right.
know of Gandalf, but they
Yeah.
didn't think that that was him. They just figured, okay, he's super powerful. He just landed. He's confused because he's clearly confused. He was thrown from what is that the Valar,
Yeah.
right? Is like the
The
gods.
gods,
They
yeah.
basically just launched him to Middle Earth, and when he gets there, he's super confused. He doesn't know who he is, and I guess all that has to come back in his memory. And he quite possibly could have been like a Saruman character if he would have, if without Nori there to show him, you choose who you want to be. I thought it was interesting the way that they connected him with hobbits in general, like the hobbit ancestry, because he has such a connection with hobbits in the stuff that we've seen so far in Lord of the Rings books. And you don't know where that connection comes from. He just loves hobbit lore. He comes up to Bilbo's house one day and is just like, yeah, I knew your parents and whatever. But this is kind of
Right.
that explanation to, okay, a hobbit is responsible for helping him when he was basically first born into Middle Earth.
Yeah, like why he has an affinity for the hobbits. Yeah,
Right,
definitely.
exactly.
I have criticisms, I guess you could say, of like those cult people. The show doesn't like even we are sitting here now, like we still kind of like don't know exactly what happened or what they were. Like the show doesn't explain like really who they are, what their motivations are. what their names even were, like what was their purpose, just to find Sauron. Like it just, I don't know. And then like when Gandalf blows them away, they look kind of like the Nine in
Nazgûl.
spectral form,
Yeah,
but the Nine don't exist yet at this point in time. So that makes no
right.
sense. There's just a lot of illogicalities and just things that aren't explained and kind of lazy. I don't like, and I'm still like, we now watched the full season, and I have just as many more questions as I did at the beginning, for the most part.
Yeah. Now I have another question for you guys, and help me out here. So at the end, we know who Sauron is, like I said, and he was working with the Elven. What's his name? Starts with there you go. He's supposed to be working to create the rings, is he not? That's what I read. Is that he, being himself, his alias, creates the rings. No, yeah, but under Helmbrand, right? That's his name.
So
Halbrand?
Yeah. So real quick, just to give you guys some backstory, like Halbrand does not exist in the lore whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
The show has really perverted the lore. That's my main criticism of it. Like, in my opinion, Tolkien would be spinning in his grave at what they've done. Halbrand doesn't exist. You could say that Anatar, the Lord of Gifts or whatever, should have been the character that was involved in this, like Sauron's form called Anatar. Mark, I'm sure you're familiar with like the Anatar thing. But it said the show gave you Halbrand, made him more of like a man, and wrote in the Southland, King of the Southlands story that never occurred in the Silmarillion or anything like that. But the last episode does kind of try to like recapture what does actually happen, which is like Sauron working together with Celebrimbor to make the rings. It doesn't even do a good job, in my opinion, but yes, kind of.
So my question is that he creates the rings based off the book. He creates the ring among the elves, and then he leaves. Here is that he disappeared, and Galadriel already knows who he is.
Yeah.
So now, is he going to come back as a different form in the next season to create those rings? Right? Does that make sense?
Right. I mean, we don't know. Right? Maybe.
Yeah.
We did see at the end.
Like
he walked to Mordor now, and he's standing in Mordor at the end. They only did make 3 rings, right? So there's still, the 9 for men, right, and the 7 for the dwarf lords that have to be made. I don't know. It just didn't do it for me, man. It just was weird. Everything. It was like they were trying so hard to kind of stick to things, but then redo it in their own image and way. And it was weird and all. Just like I said, just a lot of illogical turns to the story, especially at the end here too. Like they'd go sometimes a week without seeing certain characters. Like 1 week there wouldn't be this one storyline wouldn't happen. And they did that at the end. Now the season's over, like with Durin and the dwarves, and like that's it. We just don't know what happened to them, and it's just weird. It's just very like the two guys who did direct the show. I forget their names, but they are like rookies. Like they've never really directed anything before, and I couldn't help like as I'm watching the show, be like, yeah, this is rookies that directed this. Like there's just so much illogical shit that happens on top of the fact that it really wasn't sticking close to the lore. Like I'm not even going to consider it canon. Honestly, I'm really not. I'm going to pretend like this is just some other thing. That's like a different interpretation of Lord of the Rings or something like that.
Well, I think that's kind of what it is because they don't have rights to the Silmarillion. They only have the rights to what's in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, and that's not that much. So they basically had to create a character that was going to be Sauron in disguise. They couldn't use his name from the Silmarillion. They could use Sauron, but they couldn't. So they they were forced. Yeah, they could have done it better. But I was rewatching now when I realized we were going to do this review. I was rewatching a couple of the episodes, kind of skimming through, and you see Halbrand in a new light after you watch the finale and then rewatch. He's really sinister, but you're on his side because he's helped Galadriel, and you think, oh, cool, a king in the South. He's going to, unite the men against whatever. You want to trust him, but you saw through him. I really didn't. He pretty much fooled me.
Yeah, I saw through him from the first moment we were introduced to him, right? Because of the sigil and the king of the Southlands.
Like, yeah, it didn't make any sense.
What is that? What is that? that makes no sense. And then, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, the whole Galadriel jumping off the ship and just, I'm going to swim back to Middle Earth was so just ridiculous of a premise. And
Yeah.
then here comes a magic man, so happens to just be on a raft and at perfect timing pick her up. I'm like, this is setting in motion. They're going to have a relationship. I'm like, this is probably Sauron. Him going to Numenor and being interested in like the smithing there. Him tricking people while he's there. He is Sauron the Deceiver, right? Like it was all the hints were there. But I from the get go, I knew kind of that was going to be the premise of the show, that that Sauron's there, but you wouldn't really know who he was. And I thought that was a really good premise. I thought it was going to like keep me on edge. Of like, man, any one of these characters at any moment could be Sauron. I'm started off with such a disappointment because I immediately figured out who Sauron was in episode 1. Essentially,
yeah, and you called it. I mean, we had a full blown conversation. You were like, I think this is this, I think this is this, and this is the route they're going, and he nailed it. But when Numenor came with the queen to fight the orcs with the village people, I honestly, it was after work. I'm tired. I'm falling asleep. And then I heard that note of Rohan. And I looked up and it looked similar to Rohan. Like when they were riding with the helmets and stuff, I was like, holy shit. So when I looked up the history of Rohan, Gondor, and stuff like that, you can see the similarities. So in that sense, they actually are doing a great job trying to put as much in together. I'm just looking forward to season 2 as a base level person of knowledge. Gotcha. That's what I was telling him in the car.
Yeah, I thought the armor was a good mix up. Like the Numenorean armor was a good kind of like mix between Rohan armor and Gondor armor.
Gondor.
Right. Like it was almost as if you like took aspects of each and mixed it together into a new sort of armor.
Yeah.
So Numenor, basically Elendil and Isildur end up establishing Gondor later on. I have
also another question for you guys. Sorry to cut you off. So the stones that the dwarves have in the mines, and then that Balrog being at the bottom, what does that mean? Like, why is the Balrog down there, and how do they not know? Like, you know what I mean? Like, do the Balrog like live in the depths where nobody knows?
Well, the Balrog is Durin's bane, basically, and in the lore, what happens is good. They dig too deep. And they disturb something.
That in the movies, right?
Right. They disturb something that should have never been disturbed. But it's interesting the way it's not Durin the son, it's Durin the father that drops the leaf that ends up disturbing the Balrog. But I mean, they obviously would have disturbed it eventually anyway if they were going for the Mithril. And I thought that was really interesting when they showed that scene of that glimpse of the Balrog. I don't know if it speaks to how good the CGI is now or how far ahead of their time they were in the original movies, because it looked identical.
Jackson was great at what he did, man. Yeah.
Unbelievably good. And I think they may be trying a little too hard to play off of Jackson's movies. Like you see in Jackson's movies, Galadriel, she wants to be the queen, terrible and great. And then they have that scene of Sauron standing next to her as, his queen. Right. And you see him with his spikes on his helmet and she's standing next to him. I think they're trying maybe a little too hard. But I also like the similarities where you see Gandalf's power when he's trying to tell Bilbo, I'm trying to help you, and he gets all big. They do the same thing in the woods when Gandalf first is talking to Nori. And it's kind of, I don't know if they're doing it a disservice or a service. It's interesting. I feel like they're trying.
Yeah, they're trying to make you feel like you're in Middle Earth by
you're in the same universe.
Yeah, by doing like callbacks and things. I feel like sometimes they were a little cheap. Like even there was the scene of Galadriel and the kid, forget his name, and they were under the tree, and the orcs were like looking for them. They were trying to like replicate the scene of the hobbits hiding from the Nazgul under the tree in the forest. I felt like some of that stuff was really cheap. There was a lot of like repurposed like lines from the movies where they like said similar things.
I noticed that.
I feel like it's a little bit lacks creativity. Like make new shit, make new lines that are like wise words and things. One of my biggest criticisms, my favorite, I don't know. I felt to say a favorite, but it's probably not my favorite. But I thought that maybe my favorite episode was the last episode here, but maybe my second favorite was the one where Mount Doom was created. It looked that whole battle sequence of Udun, I think it was called, was pretty dope, and it was fun. The creation of Mount Doom, first of all, is not canon. That's not how it happens. Second of all, I don't understand the physics of throwing water into a volcano and that turns it into a nuclear explosion. And I also just don't understand like why the Rube Goldberg machine in order to get the water into the volcano. Like I don't get it. Like it's
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed like a little bit illogical. Like this whole time throughout the whole season, this sword was really a key. The key starts literally like a Rube Goldberg machine, where like a thing falls, hits another thing, leading to water, ending up like Mount Doom was like a deep fryer, I guess. Like if you throw a bunch of water into a deep fryer, it blows up. It looked really cool. Like the whole sequence looked really cool. With the CGI was well done. It's just like I don't know. It just was weird. Like why would Sauron do all that? Like why wouldn't he just make it Mount Doom? Like he's magical fucking powers and stuff. Like this whole elaborate scheme to get water in there. It was weird. I don't know.
Yeah. And to your point before about callbacks and some of it's like, no need for it or whatever. But I do have a thing about Galadriel, the actress. She is an overactor sometimes, and it doesn't seem realistic.
You mean
I don't know if you guys feel that way, but yes. I think that she tries too hard. I don't know if she's trying to really hone in on Cate Blanchett's role to try to be similar, but sometimes she just misses the mark.
Yeah, I agree 100%. She's not a great actress. Yeah.
Well, she's not Cate Blanchett. That's the problem, and she's trying to be. Like Cate Blanchett is one of the greatest actresses of our time. She's trying too hard, and that comes back to my point of how they're trying too hard to Jacksonize it. And they should have, like Scagz is saying, done their own thing a little bit. And when they do their own thing, it's kind of in a silly way, like making her a warrior when she wasn't a warrior.
They gender swapped her and Elrond, which is basically what they did. They made her the warrior, which Elrond's really the warrior. Galadriel's more of like the revered, person, elf that's like a wise mage that people trust and go to for things. They really just swapped roles. That's like the woke criticism I have of it. It's like you just, because like a woman has to do the male part now or whatever. I mean, without getting into that, but
a little bit on that. One of the things that bothers me the most is just a female dwarf in general in anything, because they don't appear because female dwarves have beards. So you may be looking at one and you just don't know it. And I feel like that's part of the mystique of a dwarf. And, that kind of, I don't care if she's black, white, Chinese. I don't think there should have been a female dwarf. I think her character's badass and I like her.
Mm-hmm.
But that bothers me a little bit.
I think they should have had some sort of beard or at least a mustache or something. Made them look maybe like, I don't know, like kind of like gypsy or something in some way.
Right.
I have criticisms definitely about Disa. I like Durin though. Durin I thought was like really well done. I like the whole character. The guy who played him did a really good job. Durin was really funny. He had like that mix of like Gimli and Thorin a little bit, kind of.
Yeah.
I liked it. I thought he was one of the definitely like the bright spots of the whole show. He was really funny. Like the potty humor he had sometimes too was pretty funny.
Yeah. And him and Elrond kind of mirror Gimli and Legolas in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that, but they didn't go overboard with it. They didn't make it like this is what we're doing,
Yeah, I liked one of the other things I like too, which we haven't talked about yet, is Ada, the guy who's kind of like the father to all the orcs. I thought he had definitely one of the most he was one of the most interesting characters in the whole show. That is the same guy who played Benjen Stark too in Game of Thrones. So that's why he might look a little familiar to people. I thought his character is really just interesting and like kind of deep. That he is like not only kind of like one of the first orcs, but he actually cares about the orcs, and like Sauron kind of just uses them to a purpose. He is an elf, right? I guess to an extent. And if you remember, it might be the Two Towers or maybe even Fellowship of the Ring, one of the extended editions, when Saruman is making the Uruk-hai, he's talking to one of them about like, do you know how the orcs like first came into being? And he's like, they were elves once, taken, tortured, mutilated by like the dark forces or whatever. I thought that was cool because it reminded me of what Saruman was saying. And I'm like, now I'm kind of seeing that play out. Like Adar is kind of like that guy that Saruman was talking about. He was like an elf that was definitely taken, turned into an orc, and then that he started the whole orcs going for it. So I thought he was really well done, an interesting character. The scene where like he and Galadriel Galadriel had him captured, and was like interrogating him. Boy, I was starting to like root for the orcs with how like menacing and like genocidal Galadriel was being about. I'm like, whoa, take it easy. Like this is actually like a nice orc, and it's just that she wants to just murder all of them and make him. What did she say? Like, I'll make sure you're the last one so that everyone's dead. It's very like just dark.
Yeah, she went hard on him. I thought he was really interesting too, and I thought he was an interesting fold to Hallbrand because you kind of think, oh, this might be Sauron. It's said that in the Silmarillion, they say that Sauron comes down in like a form that's pleasing to the elves so that he can kind of get in their midst and orchestrate what they're doing. He needed the elven smiths to complete his plan, basically. So he shows them what to do without telling them this is my real plan. And what happens is when he makes the one ring and puts it on, the elves that have the three rings, they're like, oh shit, he's gonna fuck us. So let's take our rings off and hide them. And at that point, the other 7 and 9 for the dwarves and men were already created. And he gets those, but he doesn't get the 3 elven rings. And then they put those 3 rings to good use. One of them's given to Gandalf.
Right.
Galadriel has one and Elrond has one. And they basically start healing the earth with them to try to counteract what Sauron's trying to do. And the dwarves were too stubborn and willful to be controlled. And some of those rings actually got eaten when their wearers were eaten by dragons. I read all this recently to prepare for this. But it's just interesting how the dwarves were just too stubborn to control. So they went to men. And of course, men are the easiest to control. And those are the ring wraiths.
Yeah. So they definitely are trying to adapt some of those things. But it's definitely a new imagining. Not exactly sticking to the lore, closely really at all. They're just trying to like kind of adapt sort of like plot points in a way that are similar. Like
and I think they're forced to do that because they can't use the Silmarillion, which I don't understand why they wouldn't be able to use it. I guess it's some legal thing or whatever, but
probably
that makes it difficult for them too.
Yeah, it did.
All
my
of the history.
Good.
So just to me, like the source material is not available to them. So they kind of have to make shit up. So yes, it's not exactly how I would want it. And I would, like you said, I don't think it's canon either. It's kind of like an interpretation. It's based off of Tolkien's works. It's not a straight, I want to see a better version of this eventually in my lifetime for sure. But they do have a lot of impediments in that they can't use the proper source material. So they have to make shit up.
Yeah, definitely. Again, we'll wrap it up here in a minute. But my biggest criticism is that it was 2 rookies, and I could tell the whole way through there was rookies that did it. And it's just weird, right? Because they spent like almost $1 billion on this thing, and I told my buddy at work, I was like, man, it's like you bought a Bugatti Veyron and then you handed it to someone who's never driven before. It's basically what Amazon did, and like you could see, like it crashed a lot, at least in my opinion, a couple of times. So. I don't know, Jimbo, any other thoughts before we maybe we'll give it a rating? We're running out of time here.
So my thing to that point, do you think that if Amazon went to Jackson and was like, hey, listen, we have this idea. Are you interested in doing this? Do you think he turned them down?
I don't know if they did that. I don't know if they did. Did he turn them down? You have some knowledge.
Apparently they reached out to him and they said, hey, we may be looking for some guidance and whatever, what have you. And he said he was down. and then they never contacted him again. That's what I read.
Interesting.
So it's almost like they snubbed him.
Yeah, I would have preferred they brought him back as he had like the touch for this story.
Absolutely.
And I remember a few years ago, this might be 5-6 years ago, I remember him posting a photo on his Instagram of him reading the Silmarillion, and he had post-its in there of him taking notes of certain areas. So like the way I interpreted that at the time is he was taking notes to like think about how to adapt this into a live action show or movie. This was years and years ago. So they should have brought him back, man. They really should have.
Absolutely. They made a big mistake by not doing so. Because he, like you said, he has the knack for it. He pulled it off beautifully, I think. To me, that's the best book to movie ever created.
Yeah,
so far. And he even took some liberties, but he did it in the right way.
Yeah, you have to take liberties sometimes because like books don't translate perfectly over to film all the time.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things you need to cut and what have you, but he would have been invaluable, and it would have been a much different review right now if he was on it for sure.
All right. So what do you guys want to rate it? 1 to 10. We got like 5 minutes left here before I run out of time.
I'll give it a healthy 6.5 to 7. I enjoy it. It entertains me. Yes, it has its problems, but I am excited for season 2.
Jimbo?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. You said 6.5 and 7, right? Oh, it's tough. I would give it like a 7.5 for me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is from someone who has no idea what's going on. Sure. I'm just like, yeah, give me all of it.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3. I didn't really like it. There was a couple of there was a couple of things I thought it looked cool sometimes. Knowing a lot of like the backstory made me not like it. I remember I told you, Jimbo, I was like, kind of take the blue pill here and don't look into anything because then it'll become so different from what Tolkien wrote that you'll think differently about it. I do think Tolkien's spinning his grave. There was a lot of just illogical things that happened. Time was hard to quantify in the show. There was a lot of like dumb red herrings. Isildur disappearing. We all know he survives. I don't understand why they even chose to waste time with that. Celebrimbor's dead. No, he's not. He was in the movies, right? He's not dead. They're saying Galadriel's husband, or not Celebrimbor, sorry, Celeborn. She just like waited to the second to last episode to even mention him, and then he's dead. We know he's not dead, right? So like that's like a stupid thing to even pursue. Just a lot of just dumb shit like that occurred. I thought Sauron looked cool, like in the 2 times we got to see him, like in actual Sauron form, looked pretty dope. That's about it. 3 Rings of Power. Hopefully season 2 gets better. Hopefully they bring Jackson back or something, or put somebody who's just a better, more seasoned director or team in charge. I think it's gonna be like 2 years too until the season comes out. Yeah, it took like a long time to develop this, I guess, because of CGI and whatnot. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. And final thoughts? All right, boys. Well,
covered everything.
The Fellowship of Doom. Thank you guys for joining me. That is our Doom review of the Rings of Power. We will be back to review some other things definitely in the near future. Maybe do some podcasts, some Halloween stuff. We'll see what happens.
Hell yeah.
All right, everybody. Later.